Yes.
Oh, you're muted.
Yeah. That's okay. We got your answer. And then we have Ishrat. You're in Tennessee. Where are you? Or no, you're in Missouri. Where are you? I forget.
So I'm in Kansas, living in Kansas, working in Missouri.
Okay, got you. And Teresa's in Indiana. Bernie's in DC. I'm in Virginia. Maurice is in Florida. Parviz Musavi. Not sure where you're from.
Where are you calling in from, Parviz?
I'm actually in Virginia as well. I'm in Roanoke, Virginia.
Nice. Welcome.
Great. Nice. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And then we have Khalid and Jason. So now everybody started to jump on in, which is great. Welcome to the Global Viewpoints Forum. I'm sure many of you are going to enjoy this topic today. There's so many times right now where we all feel like we can be of service, want to be of service, and just in our lives in general. So this will be a great thought-provoking discussion today. All right, so now we're getting closer to more people. All right. Nice to see everybody. So we have people from as far away as Qatar and France and all over the United States joining. So welcome to the Global Viewpoints Forum, and thanks for joining us today. I'm sure some more people will join as we go. So Bernie, I'll let you sort of talk about how the flow of the event today, and then how to use the chat room and that sort of stuff. Okay, go ahead, take it away.
So we usually just start off with some opening remarks from Mr. Rash, and then also I'll give a little bio on our speaker, Maurice. Then he'll take the floor for 15 minutes, and after that we'll have a question and answer session, just sort of discussions. Any questions you have, you can actually start thinking about and jot them down in the chat while the presentation is going. Get the juices flowing so that when the question and answer session comes, you can either unmute yourself or we can just read out your question from the chat. After that, if it seems like it'll work out really well for this group, we'll go into breakout rooms, and you don't have to do anything. We'll control all that behind the scenes. You'll basically just get shipped off to another Zoom room where you get to talk to a smaller group of people about some discussion questions that Maurice has prepared. And I put those 2 discussion questions in the chat, so you could start thinking about them, sort of what did you discover in this session, and what action will you take this week or next week because of what you discovered. So after the breakout rooms, I'll bring you all back here again as a group, and we'll just have a final sort of call to action from Maurice and any closing remarks from Mr. Rash. And then we'll leave the room open for like 30 minutes for anybody who wants to just chit chat, network, ask more questions, and anything, exchange emails, whatnot.
So Mr. Rash, would you like to start us off today?
I would. Good morning, good afternoon, buenos tardes, masal khair, salam alaikum. Everybody is well, stays well. I want to welcome everybody to the Global Points Forum. We call Creating a New Tomorrow today. Thanks for joining. And today we're reflecting a core principle of legacy's value proposition, which is that of service. Mahatma Gandhi, who was one of my deepest teachers when I spent many years in India, although he had passed by the time I was there. At the Gandhi ashram, there were many quotations, and some of my favorite quotations influenced my life. He said, "It's the action, not the fruit of the action, that's important. You have to do the right thing It may not be in your power, may not be in your time that there will be any fruit, but that doesn't mean you stop doing the right thing. You may never know what results come from your actions, but if you do nothing, there will be no result. He also said, be the compromise you want to see in the world. And these such statements, similar statements, are familiar to us in both spiritual and secular contexts. Others we're familiar with is, you cannot change a community until you change yourself, or change me, O Lord, not my circumstances. The motivation for change begins with ourself, and that means building trust in oneself. And Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi, the great Sufi poet and philosopher and teacher, said, change comes from necessity. Therefore, O man or woman, create necessity. So while we live in a world where we're all facing very serious need for change, climate change preceded the present pandemic necessity. And in fact, due to the pandemic, ironically, we're seeing very significant climate adjustments. Today's speaker, my dear friend Maurice Bassett, will help us understand the necessity to motivate ourselves and uncover our potential more specifically through service. And as I mentioned, since service has been a pillar of Legacy International's raison d'etre, it is why we are here today and why we're here on the Thursdays that we do our webinar. So I'll leave it to Bernie to do the formal introduction. I want to thank you all again for being with us. Look forward to today's inspirational session.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Rash. And we're really lucky to have Mr. Bassett with us today to share some principles to inspire us to unlock the capacity that we already have for empowering service and overcome any challenges or inhibitions or worries that we have that might prevent us from doing more meaningful service. And then also use all of these great professional skills that I know you guys have to show up in a bigger way for the greater good. And I think he's a great person to help us get there. He describes himself as a student of motivation. He has a deep interest in humanistic psychology and personal development, and as an advocate for homeopathic medicine, and he studied and embraced numerous healing modalities, very sort of eclectic background, also a diverse background of customer service, sales, marketing, management, from work in real estate, computer training, publishing, and coaching. And I think this has probably really informed his great reputation now as someone who works as an independent publisher since 2001 in the fields of business, psychology, and personal development, and worked on works with best-selling authors like Steve Chandler, Albert Schweitzer, and Abraham Maslow. And one of the things that I was really impressed about when I was talking with Mr. Bassett was this view that he has towards sort of attraction rather than a promotion standpoint, that he is not trying to sell an idea or sell an external rigid blueprint for here's how you should do service, but rather to create a sort of free-flowing exploration of our own potential. And so I'm really excited about that, and excited to welcome Mr. Bassett, and feel free to take it away.
Thank you, Bernie. I want to start by acknowledging and thanking Mr. Rosh as our visionary founder of Legacy International. I thank you for all the amazing work that you've done over the decades, and specifically for making this series of talks possible for us. And I also want to thank Mary and Bernadette and Teresa for your efforts in coordinating and facilitating these talks that have taken place over the past couple of months. Thank you very much for that. And anyone else who's involved that I may have missed, I perhaps don't know the names of everyone who's involved with the work, but thank you so much. This talk is called The Art of Service and Exploration, and it is, as Bernie was just saying, it's meant to be an exploration, not so much a blueprint or a recipe. I do have some principles that I want to share with you that have to do with how we can develop our potentials towards becoming more service-oriented, and that will help us to show up in a bigger and better way when we're in service mode. So I do have some principles, and I do have some great questions that we can ask ourselves. But ultimately, what it boils down to is that we do each do service in our own way. So how I do service is going to differ from how Bernadette does service, or Mary does service, or anyone else does service. Service speaks to us in different ways, and we're going to show up in service mode and do service in our own unique way. The service that I am talking about today is what I'd like to call artist level service. So the principles that I'm going to share with you are related to doing service at what I consider to be the highest possible levels, which would be the levels that you would aspire to as an artist. There's an anecdote I want to share with you, first of all, which is the American psychologist Abraham Maslow once asked a question of the students in his class. And he said, which of you will aspire to greatness in your chosen field? And they looked at him blankly, not really understanding what he meant. And he said, well, if not you, who then? And it's really critical to keep in mind, if not you, who? Like he says, that we want to take on the responsibilities. We want to aspire to greatness. We want to take the path of greatness and make a difference with our lives, and not be the people that are always waiting for others to do things and make changes and make things happen. So I take that as a very encouraging question to start with, that we think in terms of what we can be doing with our lives and how we really can make a difference in the world. So what do I mean by the art of service? It's about elevating your consciousness around service. It's about transformation. It's about creating great relationships. And people might say, well, that sounds good, but how? How do we do all of that? And to me, there are quite a few ways to approach it, but one of them is by asking great questions. And so as we go along, I'm going to share some of those questions with you. First of all, I want to define service so that we have some clarity around just what it is. So to me, there seem to be two primary distinctions. You can think of service as being primarily transactional. That can be your viewpoint, that you buy something at a store or you pay someone who does some work for you. It's a transaction, and these take place constantly. People are constantly buying things, selling things. It takes place in person and online. It's kind of a quid pro quo type of arrangement. And, and it's necessary that we are able to buy and sell. But there's no real human connection in a lot of these transactions. I'm not saying there never is, but oftentimes there isn't a real human connection when you think of doing service as a transaction. You're just getting something, or you're giving someone some money for something they did for you. My perspective on service is a bit different. The way I define it is I say, service says, I care. This is how I define service. It's saying I care with your actions, not just with your words. You can say I care with your words, but it's more like saying I care with your actions. It's not paying lip service to service, but actually coming from a place of love and service in all that you do. It's showing up from a place of love and service because that's who you are and who you're being in the world. Some examples might be you help an elderly neighbor with a project. You volunteer at an animal shelter. You're doing things in the world that say, I care. Your actions say, I care. You don't have to tell people that you care because your actions speak for you. Now, moving on to types of service, there are a couple of primary types of service. There are probably many types of service, but the two that I see as being the major types are more of a generic type of service where you can show up in service mode and do a kind of service that almost anyone could do. You might be volunteering at the library. You might be doing a beach cleanup. You might be volunteering at the local bird rescue organization or animal shelter, but you don't typically need special training or skills. You can always find these types of opportunities within your community. There's always needs for help, picking up trash or doing some basic thing that it's work that does need to be done. But it's not highly skilled work, but it is work that needs to be done. And there's nothing wrong with taking on these volunteer opportunities. And perhaps some of you are already doing things like this within your own communities. The other type of service that that I really want you to consider when you're thinking about getting into service mode is more like skilled and professional level service. So this is service that's based on your specific skill set and or your professional training. It's service that you are qualified to do that not everyone else can do. So maybe you're a doctor or a healthcare professional. You could be an engineer, an attorney, a graphic designer. If you make this the foundation of your service, then you can show up in a bigger, better way than if you're doing generic service that almost anyone can do. So be mindful of that. I'm not saying do one or the other. You can do what speaks to you, or you could do nothing. But if you are going to show up and be of service and make a difference in the world, then really think about whether what you're doing is generic, which has some value, or your roots are quite deep into a profession or a certain specific skill set that you have. If your roots are deep in that direction and that's where you want to come from, then you can potentially be far more impactful by coming from that place. Another question is, to contemplate is why focus on service? Why even bother? What does it matter if I show up and make a difference in the world or not? Isn't there someone else going to take care of things kind of for me? So the reasons would be because you want to think of the greater good and not only of yourself all the time. There are tremendous challenges and problems in the world today. And if we each do our own part, it does benefit everyone. If we can think of our human family, and think in terms of our human family instead of just other people, or not even thinking of other people, but if you do something for people in your family, your human family, then the whole family benefits. Be mindful of the impact that is out there that you can have in the world. There are definitely some barriers. This is the kind of, one of the challenges, we can hold ourselves back psychologically. We can think that maybe we don't have enough time or money or energy. We can always think of a reason to keep ourselves out of action. But I want to give you these principles that will help you to overcome the barriers and get into service mode and get into action and really make a difference in the world. So let me move on to the principles. These are what I call artist level service principles. I have 5, maybe there's more beyond that, but these to me seem to be the 5 really key principles that I personally like to be mindful of. Maybe you can think of your own principles that really speak to you, or you can use these if they speak to you, and that's great. One is, well, I'll just read all 5 of them first of all to you, and then I'll go back to each one. Serve beyond your pay grade. Serve beyond your comfort zone. When in doubt, serve. keep yourself fit for service. Little things do make a difference. So the first one is serve beyond your pay grade. So this is if you are someone who is, for example, in a fairly low paying job, you might be at a retail store, you might be at a restaurant or some kind of a store where you're making a small amount of money. You might be making $7 an hour or something. I don't know what is a small amount of money to people these days, but you might be making minimum wage. And the challenge is for you to not have the mindset that you're not being paid to really show up and do something big, to make a big decision, to help someone in a big way, that you always think that, well, there's a manager to take care of that because it's not really my responsibility. I'm only being paid $7 an hour. So you really want to elevate your consciousness and move beyond that level of thinking and serve beyond your pay grade. This is how you can really show up in a big way and do service in an impactful way and make a difference. Also be mindful that when you are working at a company, especially if you have a uniform on or a name badge, in effect, for the customer, you are the company. You are representing the company. So if you have a smile on your face or not, if you're friendly or not, if you're helpful, if you're in service mode to the customer or not, that's not just you as a person, it's also the company. And it's a very big deal. You might be representing a multinational company, a multi-billion-dollar company, a trillion-dollar company, but it's just you with your name badge there helping someone. It might be at the Apple store or wherever, but to the person, you're Apple. You know, how you dress, how you treat the person, how helpful you are. It's you helping them, but also in a bigger way, it's the company. It's actually Apple helping them. Or it could be at the grocery store. If you're at the cash register helping someone at the grocery store, it's the company. Serve beyond your comfort zone is my second principle. This could be a case where maybe you're at the beach and you see trash everywhere and you think, wow, wouldn't it be nice if someone cleaned that up? Maybe someone from the city or the county will go clean that up. But a more powerful place to come from is to have a mindset of, you know what, I don't like this. I'm not happy with it. I'm just going to go pick it up myself. You know, I'm going to get into action and do it myself and not just wait around for someone else to handle it, to take responsibility. And there are many, many other examples for getting beyond your comfort zone. It's something to be mindful of, though. It's a question to ask yourself, you know, am I in my comfort zone or out of my comfort zone? And then to think about where you can be most impactful. Are you going to be most impactful when you're in service mode in your comfort zone or out of your comfort zone? I find personally that the more I can get out of my comfort zone, the more impactful I can be. I'm not holding myself back. When in doubt, serve. This principle comes into play oftentimes when you have issues with worthiness, issues with you don't know if you're good enough to be the one to help out, to really serve and show up in a big way and make a difference. Maybe you think you don't have the training, the education, or you're holding yourself back in some way. But my thought on this is there isn't anyone out there who's ever going to tell you whether you're worthy. There's no governmental agency. You know, there's nothing like the equivalent of the motor vehicle department. You can't fill out paperwork and go to the motor vehicle department or the equivalent and show them your paperwork and have them tell you whether you're worthy or not. Nobody could ever tell you. It's an inner game. It's something that only you can decide. You decide for yourself whether you're worthy. You decide for yourself whether you're going to get into action or not, or keep yourself out of action. So I would say, think in terms of, freeing yourself from any doubt that you may have. The poet William Blake has a line in one of his poems. He says, if the sun and moon should doubt, they would immediately go out. So doubt is a killer. Don't let doubt hold you back. Keep yourself fit for service. This is my principle that I picked up from Mahatma Gandhi. In one of his letters, to his chief disciple, Mirabin. This is a book from a book of his called Bapu's Letters to Mira. In this letter, he tells Mirabin that he says we should keep ourselves fit for service. And so the idea is that we always want to be prepared to be able to serve. You never know when there's going to be an opportunity or a challenge. Something's going to come up randomly and unexpectedly. You always want to be ready to jump into service mode and help out. So keep yourself fit physically, emotionally, mentally. I'll give one example of this is there is a way that we sometimes hold ourselves back mentally. We sometimes have beliefs that hold us back. We have thoughts and beliefs about other people. We might have beliefs about our friends, neighbors, family members, people at work, people at school. We may have limiting beliefs, negative beliefs, and these may be keeping us from having great relationships. They may be keeping us from showing up in service mode in the biggest, most powerful way that we can. So keep yourself fit for service. Don't allow limiting beliefs to hold you back. Keep in shape physically, emotionally, and in every way possible to always be prepared to serve. And little things do make a difference. This is my fifth principle, is never think that something is too small or too insignificant. It could be something like just helping someone helping maybe an elderly person get her groceries out to the car at the grocery store. If you see that she's struggling, it can be something that might appear to be small, but yet it can make a huge difference. We don't always know in advance what the ultimate outcome is going to be of the things that we do. It's hard to really know. There's the butterfly effect. You may know the concept of butterfly effect. I believe that comes from Ray Bradbury's short story. So something small can make a big difference. So I say explore, make it a test. When you're in service mode, test out what feels right to you, what speaks to you, and what you think is really going to help people, and see what love can do. Don't diminish the little things just because you think it might be little. To someone else, it might be big. And so serve from the heart and see what love can do, and don't immediately judge something to be too little for you to bother with. So I just want to move on to a couple of other things. Elevating your consciousness around service. I know I've mentioned this already. I want to give you some questions that you can ask in order to help to elevate your consciousness around service. People often ask, how, but Maurice, I hear what you're saying, but how, how do I do this? Well, so if you can be mindful of certain key questions, in addition to these principles, it can really support you. Or as I said, come up with your own principles. But some questions that have been valuable for me are stay inside thinking that reflects a desire to serve. So you want to ask yourself questions like, what can I? How can I? You want to stay, similarly, you want to stay inside language that reflects a desire to serve. And for me, again, the same questions come up. What can I? As in, what can I do? How can I? As in, how can I help? How can I make a difference? Stay inside thinking that reflects a desire to serve. Stay inside language that reflects a desire to serve. And then finally, stay inside conversations that reflect a desire to serve. How may I serve? You can even just ask someone, how can I help? If you can stay inside the thinking and language and conversations that reflect a desire to serve, then you're going to be supporting yourself and being in service mode and doing service at what I call the artist level. I have a couple more questions to share, and then a couple questions for business owners specifically. One question that we can ask ourselves that's really valuable is what would serve this person right now Another question is, who would I need to be to create value for someone? Another question is, what could I do to treat this person the way that I myself would like to be treated? What could I do to treat this person the way that I myself would like to be treated? Now you'll notice the golden rule is in there, and I love the golden rule. It's a principle that I can't claim as one that I came up with, but it's beautiful. Now for business owners, I want to recommend asking questions like, what is the tone of my business? Do my customers feel welcomed and valued? This is how you create great relationships. Asking questions about the tone of your business, and do my customers feel welcomed and valued? The challenge with business is that a lot of businesses are doing transaction-oriented service, as I talked about earlier, that service is oftentimes just simply seen as a transaction, nothing beyond that. It's not really meant to be about facilitating human connection. It's not about showing that you care many times. And the problem with doing business that way is that businesses that essentially ignore their customers, ignore them as human beings, they soon have no customers left to ignore. They lose their customers because they've been ignoring them. They're not treating them in the way that they ought to be treated. They're not coming from a place of love and service in the work that they're doing. So those are my questions for business owners. I do have some books to recommend, which I can just read them very quickly, but if they're already in the chat, maybe that's not necessary. I should read them?
Yeah, go ahead and read them or show
Okay.
them, and we'll put them in the chat as well.
Some books and stories that have been meaningful to me that I want to share with you are, there's 5 or 6 here. The Man Who Planted Trees by Jean Giano. The short story, How Much Land Does a Man Need by Tolstoy is a good story to read for getting beyond ego, if ego is holding you back, as it does for so many people. And there's a business title which is really excellent called QBQ by John G. Miller, which is about personal responsibility. The Generosity Factor by Ken Blanchard and his co-author, whose name I forget. And then Reverence for Life, The Words of Albert Schweitzer. And Living Service, The Journey of a Prosperous Coach by Melissa Ford. Now, these last 2 books are books that I published, so that's my disclaimer. So you decide whether you want to read them or not. I did publish them. I'm a little biased since I love those books and I published them. But they are really excellent books for learning to be compassionate and also learning how to come from a place of love and service in all that you do.
Thank you so much. It looks like we already have 2 questions that popped up in the chat while you were speaking. One of them is, what do you recommend as ways to serve our communities in the virtual space we find ourselves in the midst of COVID-19? And I could also read the other one if you want.
Well, let me start with that one.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, well, I think what you all are doing at Legacy is a great example of what can be done, what's possible. You know, you're having these talks that have gone on for, I think, about 2 months now, every week, once a week. And I think they're on different topics, but I think they've all proved to be extremely valuable. You know, I would say really being in conversation with people, listening is so key. You know, you can't really know what's needed if you're not able to listen. And, you know, you're not able to listen if you're not able to be with someone. And, either with them in the room and be in conversation or with them on a video call. But, listening is really key. Listening for what's needed, looking for opportunities to serve. So the more conversations you can have, maybe because people are isolated at home now and a lot of places are still in lockdown. We aren't currently in lockdown in Florida, but I know in many, many places throughout the world, there's a lockdown. But I would say reach out to people that you maybe haven't talked to in months or maybe years, friends, people you've worked with, family, neighbors, people in your community. Get into conversation with people and really see what's needed. It can be extremely valuable, and it's a prime opportunity. You have time for it now, and you don't have time for it when you're working at the office or you're doing whatever it is you do for a living. You have more unstructured time, I think, in many cases, at least when you're in your home environment. You're not commuting 2 hours a day. You're not doing all the things that you would normally do to go to work and at work. So, reach out to people from home.
Thank you. It seems like you and Marlene were on the same page there. As you were talking, she mentioned the same idea of reaching out to friends and family and seeing what they might need. Another question that came in some cultures, the concept of service and volunteerism is not easily understood, yet service is so intrinsic to human beings. Do you have any suggestions for awakening that attribute in such cultures?
Well, I think the obvious thing that comes to mind, at least for me, say obvious, but for me is to be of greater service in the work that you do, in the paid work that you do. So, yes, in a certain culture, you may not have people volunteering at the library or doing the beach cleanups or working at the animal shelters. Maybe it's more challenging to get the community involved in certain projects. Like maybe getting a beach cleanup going in the San Francisco Bay Area is far easier than in some other area. It's highly possible. So I would shift the service focus on over to your work. So if you have a car wash, let's say you run a car wash, or you're just one of the people that works at the car wash or a coffee shop, be a great employee. Really do what you can to help people. Think in terms of being, any extra special touches that you can do. We tend to get more and more high tech nowadays and less high touch. So think in terms of, these are people and how you would like to be treated, and treat people how you would like to be treated, if not better. You can do that in your work environment. It doesn't have to be that you're volunteering at the animal shelter. So it can be from your place of business, whether you're the business owner, whether you're an employee, whether you're a contractor, whatever it might be. But do the best possible work that you can do, and really look for opportunities within your job, within your employment, to really shine and show up from a place of love and service in the work that you do at your job.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's great. And actually, we have people from all around the world on the call, so maybe we can open it up to people to see if they have any ideas on this question that in some cultures, the concept of service is not easily understood. Do you have any suggestions for awakening that attribute in such cultures? Maybe in a neighboring country, maybe in your own country, or if anyone on the call has any ideas about how to respond to that, it's up to you.
I see that Khalid here, Al-Nazi, had a question, so I think it's related, so maybe we can throw this out. In terms of improving the service, or the idea of service? How can I ask for feedback? What's the best way to get feedback about what you're doing and its impact or its effectiveness? Does anybody, Maurice or anyone, have any thoughts on that? Or
Well, I would say, yeah, it's really critical to get feedback. Sometimes you can just see that it puts a smile on someone's face. It wows them in some way. You might have done something that's, absolutely surprising that maybe no one has ever thought of doing for them before. And they're just amazed. And so you can just see, you don't have to ask, how was it for you? But you can just immediately see that it did make an impact. But if it's unclear, then you can say, was this helpful to you? How was this for you? Ask an open-ended question like, how was this for you? How was this experience for you? So yeah, it'll improve you as someone who is in service mode. It'll help you to get better, but also it helps other people because ultimately you're going to show up from a better place in the way that you're doing service. So yeah, it's really great to get feedback. And then maybe also you did something maybe the person didn't like or didn't want. Maybe the lady didn't want help with her getting her groceries out from the store out to the parking lot. Maybe you're bothering her. Like it's possible. So yeah, getting feedback is really a great thing to do if you're able to.
And then I see we have another question from Ira.
This
Oh, is
is
Shanti?
Shanti. I wanted to respond, if I may, to the previous question before we move far beyond it. The question about how do you encourage the awakening of the idea of service in other cultures? One experience that I've had through Legacy, which was very powerful in this area, is working in cultures where service is not part of the fabric of what people expect. It's not culturally accepted, but inviting people to serve, especially starting with the younger age group, but creating opportunities in which people can experience service and offer service. Sometimes it takes a little bit of an authority to create that venue and then invite other people into it. But often it's not because there's a barrier to the service. There's just no precedent in having that be an option or an acceptable automatic action. So taking the initiative to create a venue and invite other people in is often a way to stimulate new service and new understanding of its value.
Thanks, Shanti.
So we do have another question coming in as from Ira. How can you challenge businesses to integrate service as a strategy?
Yeah, well, I think the really successful businesses already do that. If you look at some of the real superstars out there, if you look at companies like Southwest Airlines, if you look at Marriott, J.W. Marriott, the founder of the mega company, the famous hotelier himself, he had a habit of going around to his hotels in person. He would walk the property. He would go around and inspect hotels. He would inspect them for cleanliness. He would look at the rooms himself as the owner of the company and the founder. And he wanted to be sure that these were up to his standards, that the customer was going to have a great experience if they were checked in at one of his properties. They weren't going to be checking in and finding a dirty room or a room that was missing towels or soap or anything that was out of place. So he would go around and check on things. And this is one of the most successful hotel brands in the world now. They own the Ritz-Carlton, super, super successful, but they came from a place of service, of having the customer in mind first and foremost, treating the customer the way that you want to be treated. And there's many other examples. There's a lot of smaller companies I've actually done business with. Like I have a favorite chocolate company. They're based in France. It's called Z Chocolate or Z Chocolat. And they are amazing. It's just unbelievable. They think of so many little details, so many nice little extra touches. Like you can send chocolates to someone as a gift and put a customized note in there with your message, and then you can add a photo to the note card if you like, and you can add all kinds of extras and things and customize the assortment of chocolates. And so whether it's a small business or a mega company, $1 trillion company, you can still operate with the needs of the customer in mind, and really beyond the needs. I don't mean to say needs in a minimalistic way, but really serving in an artistic way, serving at the highest possible levels. It can be done. Probably there's some examples from Apple and Microsoft and other mega companies. The ones that are super successful really do have it as a core philosophy if you really dig deep enough and really look into it. One of the books I recommended actually just now, The Generosity Factor, this book is all about S. Truett Cathy, who's the founder of Chick-fil-A. Maybe people don't know, but he was an incredibly loving and kind and generous man. He's passed away now, but he would, well, first of all, as you may know, the restaurant is closed on Sundays so that people can they can either worship as they please. At least one full day a week, they're off from work. They can worship. They can, if not, they can just be with their families. They can just enjoy family time. They're not always having to work 7 days a week or always having to worry about getting into work. And it must be costing that company millions and millions and millions of dollars every year to be closed on Sundays. And all the other fast food restaurants are open on Sundays. If you notice, only Chick-fil-A is closed. So read The Generosity Factor. It's a wonderful book. It'll give an example of how companies are making it work, how coming from a place of love and service really can work, and it can affect your bottom line and can make the company more profitable and more viable.
Hi, Maurice. I had a question for you regarding young people getting involved in service. I was wondering if you had any advice for how we could empower young people to feel that while there are a lot of services that they can do, like you mentioned, carrying groceries out to the car or helping, fix up a house. There's also more specific service, such as like looking over resumes or getting more involved like in businesses. How can we empower young people to feel like they can take part in that higher level service without feeling like they're underqualified or that they don't have that background to get involved?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know that I'm an expert on this, but I will say, when I started getting into service mode as a boy, I did volunteer at the local library. I was also an altar boy at the church. Sure, I did other things, at school or something, but I think what it takes is probably doing an inventory of what your interests are. And I guess the question would be is, people would just normally be left to themselves to do an inventory, or not, or maybe they just wouldn't do it, So, if people do their own inventory of what speaks to them and what changes they would like to see made in the world, and maybe they love animals and they want to help improve the lives and welfare of animals. Maybe they think, well, I want to go volunteer at the animal shelter or help animals to get adopted. So people can do their own inventories, but it might be that possibly some group coaching or individual coaching might really facilitate doing an inventory of, well, what are your interests? And then let's look at your interests and see see if we can kind of match up your interests with what opportunities might be available. There may be existing volunteer opportunities, or it may be that you just have to kind of create your own, kind of forge ahead and create your own. Maybe you create your own nonprofit or your own local group within the community, or it could be an online group. It could be through Facebook or one of the social media outlets. But yeah, I don't know that I ultimately have the answer, and there's certainly no prescription out there that I can say, yes, you have to do it this way. It's really what speaks to you. I think leading by example is extremely powerful. So if the young person has parents or aunts or uncles or neighbors that are very service oriented, they're showing up in the community and doing service, that can be extremely powerful. If they don't have those examples, those role models, then it's unfortunate in a sense. But role models, if there are role models, that can be a great way to facilitate the process of the younger person, teenager, or even younger perhaps, getting into service and just taking some small step, like go volunteer at the library once a week or twice a week. It doesn't have to be some huge thing that's going to take a lot of time and a lot of energy. And about worthiness, yeah, I know that is an issue for people. But again, like I said, who's to say whether you're worthy? I mean, it's an inner game, and I know it can be a challenge for people, but ultimately it is something that you decide for yourself. Do you want to be kept down and kept small in your life? And maybe you're keeping yourself small. It's not even someone else keeping you down. It's maybe you're keeping yourself down by your thinking about your own value, your own potential, your own capabilities. So it's about, capacity building. It's, not thinking in terms of your worth, but thinking in terms of your capacity and how to build up your capacity. The more you can build up your capacity, the greater your sense of worth is going to be. The greater your sense of self-worth is going to be. If you can see that your capacities are greater today than they were yesterday, then you're going to feel better about yourself, feel more capable. And that's really the direction to go in, I think, is thinking in terms of your capacities, looking for role models, either at home or within the community or online, and doing an inventory of your interests and seeing if you can match up your current interests with some existing opportunities that might be available in the community or, again, online.
Hi, Dana.
Hi. I was like, do you want me to just jump in right now? So first of all, thank you so much for giving this talk. And I was wondering, how can you minimize the intimidation factor as a barrier to entry for people into more specialized service contexts? So things that are more like specific than just like beach cleaning or something that maybe not everybody can do.
Can you say the first part again? Minimize the what?
Like the intimidation factor.
Intimidation factor as a barrier to get
to entry. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that doesn't really occur to me too much because I haven't had too much of a personal challenge with that, but I can see how it could be a challenge. We hold ourselves back in so many ways. I mean, we could probably sit here and just talk all day about how, something happened with the way I was raised when I was a child, and I didn't feel like I was ever good enough, and I was always being punished and told that I was bad or wrong, and so yeah, there's so many ways that we can be intimidated and hold ourselves back. We can think, we can be doubtful, fearful. So basically the opposite of fear is love. And so, intimidation, I mean, it's kind of another way of saying I'm fearful, I'm anxious, I'm fearful, I'm intimidated, worried. I mean, these are all kind of synonyms, at least from my perspective. So I would kind of take a look at what the opposite is, which is, love, compassion. If you can start to move in the direction of love and compassion and service, caring, then you're really shifting into a new paradigm. So there's the old paradigm where you were worried and fearful and anxious and intimidated. And that maybe you even, at some point you may think, well, that's the old you. I don't mean you specifically, but so at some point that can even become the old you. And then now there's the new you. So the new you is stepping into what you might call a greater compassion consciousness, or even a global compassion consciousness. You know, when you think of Greta Thunberg and some of the climate activists, a lot of young people now are real advocates for the climate crisis. And they have what I would call a global compassion consciousness. Now, it's not just compassion for people, it's compassion for the earth and the people and the animals. So it is people, but it's the planet, it's animals. So if you can start to move into this paradigm where you're all about compassion, you're all about love, you're all about caring, you're all about treating people the way that you like to be treated. If you elevate your consciousness, I know I said this in the talk, the more that you can embrace that and really live it and really step into it, elevating your consciousness is really key. When you live at a low level of pressure, there's not much you can do. You know, like I need a certain amount of pressure of gas to be able to turn my stove on and to get it to light and cook something on the stove. And if there isn't any pressure, then I don't get any flame. You know, like, so you need a certain amount of pressure, a certain amount of intensity, a certain amount of elevation of consciousness. It's really critical. It's also about capacity building, what I was saying just a moment ago. We all have these amazing potentials, amazing capacities, amazing abilities to transform. So the question for us is just really, do we want to embrace that? Do we want to step in that direction? If we do, there's to watch, videos to watch. No, younger people love videos. I love to read. A lot of younger people love to read too, which is great. But videos are great, amazing videos. You know, we're doing this call on video. There's great TED Talks. There's great documentaries. There's great books. So educate yourself. Do what you can to learn and grow. Challenge yourself. Look for opportunities to serve. How does that sound?
Yeah, thank you very much. That's great. Passion.
If I could jump in just for a second and say that if I understand the question correctly, then that here is an opportunity to do something which I've always wanted to do more of with Legacy International, which is to create more mentorships. And so if you take if you determine the interests like Maurice had suggested earlier, and sort of understand what, listen to someone in their interests, or they have a specific area, and then match them with a mentor who understands that they have to go step by step into a process, and learn also. Part of that learning to me is very important to understand the value of vulnerability. You know, intimidation is one thing, and vulnerability can be something else. It can be a very positive psychological and spiritual experience. Because after all, when we start to realize what we can't control in life, it's 99% of what we think that we can control, we really don't. So if we can understand what a person's interests are and match them with the right individual, which I think Maurice would agree, because he runs a coaching school, who will be speaking to us, and Maurice's wife Ilona, who's a coach, that if you match the right people up with the right people, then they're going to just ease someone into their own capacity and capabilities and increase them. It's something that I hope that we're going to be introducing more and more in our legacy work. So in specific areas, this is really good, because you're dealing with subject matter experts.
Yeah.
And they know what they've gone through to get to be who they are. And in our work, of course, we're really blessed that the subject matter experts that we have are, for the vast majority of them, very compassionate individuals who, even if they come from cultures where volunteerism is not something that's, in service is not something that is de rigueur, the experience, they somehow, in my way of looking at it, you know, the divine will is that they come into contact with us and they're able to express something they weren't able to express before. And part of that is to help others. And if we look at the service projects, for example, and even some of the entrepreneurial businesses that come out of our work, so many of them inculcate this concept of service and volunteerism. So I think that this mentorship and coaching is a really important aspect of, I think, if I'm understanding your question, answering your question.
Yeah. So it's just more about like using compassion and using mentorship as a way to access, like, everyone has these unique capacities and kind of channel those into service work.
Yeah, because as I say in my lectures always, we're hardwired for these things. We're hardwired for compassion. We're hardwired for justice. We're hardwired for love. It's universal. So what we need to do is to have the examples before us, and to show in a very practical way, what I call practical idealism, a practical way in which these things are beneficial to society, to yourself, to your business, to your community, your local community, to your family. It's just translating one thing into another.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we have another question from Khalid about talking about mistakes people make in service. I think he's going to give us a little more detail on that. So like, how can I deal, he said, how can I deal with mistakes that I make in service?
How can I deal with mistakes that I make in service? Okay, well, that's a bit general, but
Yeah.
you know, I'd like to think that we can all learn from our mistakes. Also, you know, it kind of depends on you know, what the context is, what the situation is. I mean, if you know, if you're a plumber and you're hired to do a job and you completely mess it up and you charge the person anyway, well, that's a problem, you know. Yeah, you know, like, so you know, you didn't do your job, so you know, that's no problem. Now, it could be a learning experience. Maybe you're an incompetent plumber, or maybe you're just having a bad day. You didn't have a good night's sleep, or who knows what happened. But you know, if you're volunteering at the animal shelter and you made a mistake, but maybe it was you didn't have the proper training, or you just didn't, you know, it's the first time you had to clean out the cage for the dogs and you just didn't get it quite right. Maybe you just weren't clear. So you know, it's hard to say, but I would just like to think that, you know, we can learn from our mistakes. I have tremendous faith in our potential and our capacities. So the first thing is just to acknowledge if you did fail in some way, if you made a mistake or you failed. I mean, in a sense, we don't ever really fail. There's a saying that goes, experiments never fail. But, you know, if you think of something, no scientific experiment ever fails, because we can always learn from it.
Maurice, you know, I had a very couple of years ago when I was speaking to someone at the Moroccan embassy, and it goes back to something you said earlier about listening. You know, even if we're trying to monetize the work we do, which we're doing, we have to get paid for the work we do, but it's still service, and we're trying to we can do and help people. And one of the things that the Chefs d'Affaires said to me, he said, most people, you know, said to us when we were at the meeting, he said, most people come in and tell us how they're going to help us with what we need to do. He says, but very few people come in here and ask us what we need. And in other words, so it goes back to this listening. So I think you're going to make far fewer mistakes in service if you take the time to listen and to understand what is needed. And then you also have the ability to say, well, am I serving your needs, or am I fulfilling your need in the way that you would like me to? Because you've already started by asking them what they need. So you actually touched on this earlier when you talked about listening, and it's like going deeper into that. Don't serve without knowing what the need really is. And that's it. So obviously, sometimes you can see it. You can see the trash on the ground or something like that. You can see what the need is. But even in that situation, where are you going to put the trash once you pick it up?
Yeah.
So, in some cultures, where are you going to put it?
Yeah.
So you may have to go back a step and create a place to put the thing. So, listening, I think listening addresses that, like you said earlier.
Sure. Good point. And I'd be happy to have clarification on that question too, if the person wants to make it a little less general. I'm happy to have more.
Sure. I think one of the things they mentioned was they were just worried about losing the customer because of the mistake. That was the other info. And I think your idea of honesty kind of got at that. Taking the time to listen and know, need, and avoid mistakes. Thanks. We also have another question coming in from Angel. I see his hands up. So
Hell, yeah.
Angel, sorry.
Yes, well, it was more rather than a question, the possible answer to reduce the intimidation factor. I speak very humbly because I'm not an expert at all. I would say creating a positive environment. It's a way to really integrate everybody. It really helps everybody to get into whatever you want, service or whatever. Just avoiding negative criticism or things like that. So positive environment helps for nearly every endeavor, I would say. And also, about the avoiding mistakes, a way to respond to mistakes, also very humbly, because I'm not an expert, but I would say it would be a three-phase sort of acknowledging the mistake, apologizing, and volunteer to repair or compensate, because what creates a lot of frustration is that the people still feel that there was a mistake and it's not acknowledged. So acknowledge was mentioned by Maurice, but I would say perhaps apologize and volunteer to repair or compensate could be a good follow-up for that.
Okay, so we just have like a minute or two left. We kind of bypassed the breakout rooms today because it seemed like we had a good flow going. But if there are any last burning questions before we close it down for today, feel free to jump in. Yeah, go ahead.
Ishrat.
Maurice, thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. I learned a lot of things from this. And this is not a question, but rather a comment that goes along with the conversations that happened. One of the quotes that I was reminded of today, hearing to you speak, is from Maya Angelou. And she said that, I have learned that people will forget what I said, and people will forget what I did, but people will never forget how I made them feel. And as long as businesses in their day-to-day interaction remembers that, that creates that component of compassion and love and service comes through. And with Dana's question as well, in terms of intimidation, if you remember that in your day-to-day interaction, you listen to people. So all of those things, I was reminded of this quote as I was listening to you, that in our day-to-day interaction, every interaction that we do, whether it is for work or for other, besides our paid work, it is about how we how we look at the other person and how we make them feel and how we make them understand. That creates that environment for service. So just wanted to make that known. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to, am I muted? Yeah.
No, you're good.
Good, I'm good, okay. One of the things that's always been a thread throughout the youth work is a play on words that Mr. Ash uses when he talks about social responsibility, and that responsibility is the ability to respond. And I think that we all want to give, we all have an innate desire to assist one another. So I think what's interesting is in that creating of that welcoming environment, or that how you make people feel, is also just supporting and encouraging the way that they are able to respond in whatever venue that is. I think some of the most moving service experiences that I've seen or been a part of or helped create, you know, for other people to get involved in are those that involve people at various levels, expose people to people with disabilities who are now created this whole community garden for their community to get involved in. It's like making that human connection, and that we all have that ability to respond. So this has been a very thought-provoking discussion, Maurice. Thank you. It's nice to have these time pauses where we kind of think a little bit more deeply about what we might all do, you know, regularly. So thank you.
My pleasure. Shall I share some concluding remarks, or are we?
Yes, please go for it.
So my final thoughts to wrap up the call today: keep your eyes open for examples of exemplary and inspiring service. Get a feel for how you're being treated when you're out shopping at a restaurant, when you're taking a flight, staying at a hotel, or just going to the local car wash. How are you being treated? How does it feel for you? And could it be a better experience for you? What could that particular company be doing to make it better for you? So the idea is to learn from your interactions out in the world. What are these companies doing or organizations doing when they are serving you? And think about it, feel how it feels, and be conscious of it. Don't be unconscious, but again, elevate your consciousness and learn from it, and allow that to inform the way that you yourself show up and do service. It will help you to get better and better and better. Thank you to everyone.
Thank you very much. Any last comments from Mr. Rash or Mary before we take our photo and then break for networking?
Well, certainly I want to thank Maurice, of course, and for a very stimulating discussion and very important subject. You know, a lot of what you said reminds me, you know, as we come out of this quarantine and we move back into society, inshallah, that happens in a safe way and in a healthy way, not just for economic, but for politicization or political reasons. It sort of reminds me of I studied and started our Montessori school, that, you know, the child at the age of 6 comes around the ages of between 3 and 6, comes out of the state of fairly much quarantine and seclusion in the home, except in some modern societies where we put babies into daycare. too early, in my opinion, comes out of kind of seclusion into society. And it's what Dr. Montessori called the herd instinct. You know, we have this natural tendency, and you have to adjust. And there are conflicts that take place, and person just starts to develop their own identity then, and then the ethical and moral principles between 6 and 9 begin to become aware, they become aware of that. And in a strange way, I think that when we go back into society again as individuals, a group of people, we're going to have to go through that. We're going to have to go through that process. And to me, that's an opportunity for relearning, unlearning bad behavior or behavior that was not just antisocial behavior, but anti-planetary behavior. When you think about the examples you gave today, for example, when you talk about the examples you gave today, so many of them were social examples, right? I mean, you have to go to business, you go to a restaurant. You say, go to a restaurant. Well, you can't go to restaurants right now, you know, or you meet your friends somewhere. Well, we can't meet our friends somewhere. And in a way, it's a reintroduction to our initial programming, or to that we go through these stages of programming. So we have an opportunity. And for those of us who might be blessed to see some of this and be in a position because of our work, our organizations, the kind of people that because we are in a service world, I've been in the service world for the last 40 some years, we have an opportunity to remake the picture. So thank you very much for contributing to that today. Thank you everybody who came, and you know, spread the word. These are good sessions and more people come to them. I'm very happy to be with you again, and thank you all. Thank you Allah for seeing you again. It's so good to see you, and of course, and Hel and others. I think it was 2010 on Allah that we met, and IYLEP, and I'd love to have the opportunity to speak to you more in person. Thank you for the message on the chat. Thank you very much, everyone. We're going to leave it open for a little while afterwards, Bertie?
Yeah, for a little bit, maybe like 10 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you
Again,
so
I have
much, Mr. Rash and Maurice, for this great talk. And we do want to just close out the session with a photo. If you want, Teresa, you can take it from here.
Yes. Okay. So everyone, we're going to take our weekly photo. If you would like to turn on your camera, go ahead and turn it on. I'll give you a short countdown. If you want to do a thumbs up or whatever, go for it. All right. 3, 2, 1. Got it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. And feel free to join us again next week. And then the following week after that, we have Alona who will be presenting. So there's a lot of exciting talks coming up this month, Motivation May. So yeah, feel free to join us again. And if you got to go, then thanks for joining us, but feel free to stick around for 10 minutes. We'll keep the rooms open.
Thank you, Maurice.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Dana,
Maurice, very
Thank
much.
you, everyone.
Thank you.
Could you tell, how did you hear about us? And can you tell us a little about yourself?
Are you talking to me? I'm sorry, I missed the first part of that.
Dana, is it
Yeah.
Dana or Dana? Dana?
Dana, yeah.
Okay.
So I actually did a legacy program in 2015 when you guys were administering Nisli Y. I went to Morocco. I went to Marrakesh in the summer of 2015. Yeah. And since then, I'm at Cornell now, and I am in the public service center there. I'm on the board for our translator interpreter program. So I was it's all about like service learning and stuff here. And I'm hoping. أهلا بيك. شكرا بزاف عليك. I'm to DC in the fall, potentially. So I've been reaching out and looking for ways to potentially get more involved with legacy in that capacity going forward. So.
Wonderful. Good to see you. And I'll tell Mita that you were on too.
Absolutely. I remember I saw your name and I was like, oh my goodness, is he somehow like he's got to be connected to Mita Rush somehow, because she was administering us when we were in DC before we left. So I was like, oh, that's great.
Great.
All right.
Wonderful.
You must miss Morocco a lot, huh?
I do. I actually went back in 2017. I did the full year, the academic year in Italy.
Oh,
So I was in
nice.
Rabat that time. So I've had experience in Marrakesh and Rabat. I do miss it.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I was there for a month and I was like, oh, I want to go back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, welcome.
Yeah.
Welcome.
I totally resonated, like your question really resonated with me, that whole like intimidation factor thing. That was exactly what I was thinking about too. And it's interesting because like in my mind, when I feel intimidated, sometimes my mind starts sort of scripting things like, oh, I'm going to say this, then they're going to say this, then it's going to be like this, then it's going to be like that. But oftentimes that script has nothing to do with reality at all. It's just a script. And when I try to like force myself not to have the script, it doesn't work. Actually, it's kind of like, you know, how they say, do that challenge. Don't think of an elephant. Under no circumstances should you think of an elephant. Well, you're obviously going to think of one because your brain is like triggering itself to not think of something. And so like, it's hard to like beat fear with fear. So it has to come from this place of like, instead of saying, what am I not focusing on, then what am I focusing on? And that's what I really liked about Maurice's talk is like, okay, what is like, let's say, imagine I'm a car, I can only focus on my side of the street. What can I do? And I can't control what's coming in the other direction. Yes, sometimes I want to look over there and see how the cars are moving and control them, but I can't. So I just refocus my own, you know, my own brain back to what am I doing? What's my next right step? But yeah, that was for me like the same kind of thing. I'm like, oh yeah, you know, I want to step it up. How can I do that? Because there is that intimidation factor sometimes.
Yeah, we have a lot of volunteers that come in, or they come to one of our like info sessions and they're really interested in potentially becoming translators, but they're worried about their level. Like that's a constant problem because they're in a room with a lot of like heritage speakers who have been speaking a language at home their whole lives. And we all tell them it can't hurt you to come and try. Like it can't hurt you to go to the we have a whole like certification system in place because these people go out and they're translating for different agencies all over the place. But we have we say it can't hurt you to try. It can't hurt you to at least meet with and connect with other speakers of this language that you're trying to serve people in, because they all have a similar mindset. Even if you don't end up serving in the same exact capacity as them because of your language level or because you're not comfortable with the content that you're translating. But yeah, I like the idea of compassionate consciousness. That was great. Thank you so much.
Allah, can you talk? Can you unmute so I can hear your voice again after so many years?
How are you, everyone?
Hello, welcome.
Salam alaikum, Ramadan Kareem, Sidi.
Ramadan, everyone. I'm so happy. I don't know, I'm going emotional. I'm so happy to see all of you. It has been such a long time. I think since 2010 through ILAB program of Iraq.
Tell people about who you are and where you are and what you're doing.
I'll try to open a camera. It's not that clear. I'm wearing dishdasha. Formal though. This is the great thing about e-conferences and online workshops. I've done my PhD in the UK at Bangor University, and I changed the university where I work. So I moved from Anbar University to Baghdad University. Now I'm teaching at Al Iraqiyya University. I'm teaching the same subject, which is English literature, and for undergrad students. But through this hard times, we are working from home and setting studios at our homes for everything, for all the requirements for the programs, giving lectures and entering discussions with the lecturers and students. It's going well, not too bad. It's a very new, brand new experience for Iraq. It's not an easy process, because you have to teach students how to work on programs. I hold like several sessions for my lecturers, my co-workers and and colleagues at the university to, with the small experience that I had from the UK on how to work on such, softwares and programs. It's going well, not too bad, and we are coping. It's a new opportunity for the Ministry of Higher Education to develop themselves and try to be open-minded for several programs and methods of teaching. And they had to do it the hard way, but it's fine.
So good to see you again. You got your PhD in literature, didn't you? If I remember correctly, did you get it in English literature? Is that